Good evening. Welcome to the Facilities Committee meeting on Tuesday, May 14th. We are having some technical difficulties, so it is not live streaming right now, but we are recording and we will post later. So thank you. Welcome, and I will turn it right over to Mr. Morris for his administrative remarks.
Thank you. Good evening. The highlight of tonight's evening is the update on Ithan Elementary School. So looking forward to getting to that and hearing about where we are in the project. However, before that, we have two consent agenda items to go over real quick. So whenever you're ready.
Great. So first, any public comment? Live or recorded? None. We'll review of the minutes. How do the minutes from last meeting look? Any comments? Off we go. So we are on to the agenda item 401, laminate wooden beam repair at Radnor High School.
Thank you. Yeah, the first agenda item is the laminate wood beam repair at the Radnor High School. So if we go back a few months ago, we discovered that the laminate beams, or glue-lam beams as they call them, the over top of the cafeteria area were in need of repair. So it was recommended to us that we hire a structural engineer, come out and evaluate the beams, find out what the best repair method is. So we had someone come out, gave us a detailed report, which we have attached for review, along with photos. And this proposal is from Waterproofing Technologies to properly repair those beams and put them back into a healthy service. Any questions?
Okay. Any questions? I mean, I think that the key here that is we can do the repairs are going to begin in the summertime, correct? When the students are out of the building.
Correct.
But the students or the building is not at risk.
No, we had a structural engineer. Building is not at risk. Structural engineer came out, did all their evaluations, which is why we're able to repair and not replace.
Excellent. Ms. Solomon?
Yeah, so a couple months ago, we had a presentation. I think we entered into a contract with a roofing company.
Yes.
Is this in addition to that, or this
Now,
part of that?
the laminate glue beams are a totally separate item from the roofing. But it is with Waterproofing Technologies, which is the construction company that is doing the roofing work, all right? So we found, because of the way the repairs needed to be done, with cutting them back and modifying the roof line, which we have all the detailed drawings in there for review and be happy to go over all that. We found that doing that work in conjunction with the roofing made the most sense because some of the flashing detail, we are actually going to shorten the roof overhang over the top of the cafeteria, which will result in actual change order, a deduct change order in the roofing. So we'll actually get money back on the roofing.
So can you just refresh my memory? What was the amount for that?
So the
Roofing contract?
roofing contract in whole or the deduct?
Both.
Okay. The roofing contract in whole, I have to go back and get the accurate numbers, but it was just a little over $5 million for 49%, basically 49% of the roof. The deduct is roughly around $14,000.
Not being a roofing expert, you got us, I don't know.
So just to kind of put that price at ease, the roofing is done through state contract. So everything is line by line item costed out. It's all been approved and it's all been bidded. So when they go through and they look at what work they're taking away from the roof, they go line by line and they add up all of the items. So a lot of it is really material costs. A majority of it is material costs because there's less roofing that has to go back, a little bit less maintenance that has to go back. And when I say we're shrinking the roof line, we're shrinking it about 18 to 24 inches on each side down along the. So it's not a considerable amount of shrinkage, but it is enough to warrant a deduct.
I guess my confusion about it is, why isn't this part of the original roofing bid?
So it was recognized, and if we go back to the January presentation, it was recognized as being needed to be repaired, but at the time, it needed to be evaluated by a structural engineer, which was recommended at that time. So we contracted then, took that recommendation, contracted with a structural engineer. They were out for several different visits, looked at different ways of repairing it, did the structural analysis to make sure the building was safe first, and then looked at several different methods and means of actually repairing these without replacing them. So that took a little bit of time to get all of that, but the lamb beams are not roofing, right? They are a completely separate item. So that's kind of where,
They're like
Okay.
structural beams.
they're structural beams, yeah, not roofing material.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to 402, RHS Accessibility and Wellness Project Change Order.
All right, thank you. For this next change order, I'm going to hand it over to Bill Dolan, who's been spearheading the accessibility and wellness project since its implementation, so.
Thanks, Ken. As a segue, I'll just say that the roofing contractor did start about a week ago, and so far the tone and the way they're set up and safety measures and how clean, and it just has, I think they're off to a great start. And that segues into this is because the Accessibility and Wellness Project we haven't had an update on in quite a while. There hasn't been a whole lot going on. We have been in and using every new space that we've built and renovated since the beginning of the school year. And throughout the year at spring break, fall break, Christmas break, we've been in there with electrical contractors, general contractors, doing what's called the outstanding items list and or the punch list. So we've been active on a big list of little things throughout the year. We haven't seen a change order probably in close to a year. The change order that's before you now is a level 2, which, just to remind everybody, that's a change order that needs certain approvals, doesn't need full board approval. The board would ratify it, but the facilities chair, the superintendent, and the board president have reviewed it, and when they recommend it and approve it, then it goes in front of the full board for a ratification. I'll also mention that this is a grouping of 5 smaller change orders that were presented and then grouped by the architect and the construction management company into one change order that has a net, so basically it's a credit back. It's not an added cost, but it's a savings. So that's always good to bring to the board.
I was happy to approve that.
And it's a lot of little details. Generally, these are what we call T&M tickets, time and material tickets. The lion's share of this is things that happened over the course of a year, specifically carpentry and carpentry and ceiling related inside the existing building areas where when you get to demo and you find that there are conditions behind what you demoed out are not what you thought they were going to be, and you have to do some modifications to make them work. We track the materials, the man hours, it's in a log, it's submitted for review, it's reviewed by the architect, by myself, and by the construction management firm before the change orders are even vetted and put into a formal AIA document to come to us. So most of this are time and material tickets for those type of items. I'll just highlight one other thing is there is an asphalt paving index, which is written into the contract so that as the price of asphalt paving changes seasonally throughout a project, the contractor adjusts up or down the pricing of it. A lot of the paving work was done about a year ago when the index was higher, and so there's a portion of this is that adjustment, and it's just simple math that's based in the contract. So it's a calculation. We've triple checked that. And the other thing is a credit on a decorative fence around our maintenance yard that went out of production during the pandemic, and we were struggling to get a fence set up in time to get school started. So we asked them to take that out of their contract and then we hired a local fence company to put in an alternate fence for it around our maintenance yard. You'll see a credit in here, then we did pay out of pocket, but we saved about $18,000 in doing that. So those are that big picture of the little details. I can go into as much detail as we want, but I'll put it to you for questions.
Any questions? I will just say on the fence, because we talked about this, the fence that's outside the maintenance area, because the original fence that we were supposed to have was supposed to be opaque. We weren't going to see through it for privacy. And so now you can see through, and they are going to explore some aesthetic ways in order to create a barrier, privacy area. The reason being that when you are sitting in the Spirit Gallery, this beautiful new area, you're looking straight out to all the maintenance. So we are exploring some, what we can do to kind of beautify that area.
I can tell you that just today it came up in a pre-scheduled meeting with our landscaper to deal with we have some blank slates out there. We have some planting beds that we have to populate, and 2 of them are along that fence. So that came up today, and we had some good options.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, so now on to the main event, 403, update on the building at Ithan Elementary School.
All right. So this evening we have Steve Behrens from Breslin Architecture, along with Damian Spar from Site Logic, who is our construction management company. And they are going to give an update on building the new Ithan. As part of the agenda, we have updates on the board meeting decisions in the near future, a schedule update on kind of the project milestones, the process where we've been in the past, approvals, currently where we're at, and again, what to expect in the future. We have a Act 34 review, so go over how we come up with the budget and the Act 34 limitations with regards to construction, design development costs estimating versus schematic design cost estimates, and then some value engineering recommendations. So to move it forward, I'm going to hand it over to.
Can I just make one comment on the process here, just for everyone on the committee? We recognize this is a lot of information, there's a lot of detail, so this is coming from when we saw the significant overage last month. This is all the work they've done in the last month in order to, bring those costs more in line. And so really, as a process, this is a preview to, we will see this presentation again next week. So while, of course, we're open, if we have burning questions and we want to share a few overarching or bigger scale, we recognize that we are going to need some time to digest what you present today and look through the detail, and then that will be followed up with the full board next week. Thank you.
Good evening. So the first slide that you're seeing in front of you is what I call the bottom line up front. I thought it was appropriate that we talk a little bit about what we've seen since schematic design and go through that up front so that we're kind of not waiting until the end to discuss the costs. We have been talking about the process of designing the building we need, designing it to our ideal, and then comparing that to what we would prefer to afford and what we really are allowed to afford when it comes to building a new school under the Act 34 guidelines of 1973 that are required by Pennsylvania Department of Education. The bottom line is that as we worked on the building between schematic design and moved toward that ideal and crystallized some things that were prior not fully designed out, particularly the site work, we had the cost of the work was shown to go up significantly. That cost then was met with our normal process of looking at what the design was in its raw form and working on it to make it efficient and make it more cost appropriate to what we want to afford and what, again, PDE will allow us to afford. We spent a lot of the last month coming up with those options to make the building cost efficient and keep it, not only keep the program integrity, we've actually improved some program integrity, but also to make sure that the building continued to have wonderful form and function and that was not depleted. This is absolutely the process that these projects go through every time. The only difference here really is sometimes we get a little bit of a larger gap that we have to work back toward our budget. And we have to work a little bit harder because that gap gets bigger. The reason that the gap is of size here is we started off with a site work allowance of $6 million. And when that site work was finally designed, which happened at DD, the true design of that site work was known and it was significantly higher. So that was a large part of what we ended up having to deal with. But what we have effectively done is find design efficiencies, find ways to keep all of the program in the building, and really, I think, keep the building unchanged in terms of beauty and function, and certainly in terms of durability, then work our costs back down. Now, that cost differential is still about $4 million from schematic design. One thing that I will tell you is that we had a bid event just last week for a new elementary school in Pennsylvania. Our cost estimates have been chasing inflation for a long time. At that bid event, our cost estimates were higher than the actual cost of the bid. So we're finding that our cost estimates are catching up to inflation, and we're hopeful that that's reflected here. And we're going to continue to work on ways to reduce costs, provided that they do not impact the integrity of the building the way we all want to see it, and the way that it functions, and with its form. So I wanted everybody to understand that that's where we're headed with all this, and bring that, let you know that up front, so that as we work through this, you have that as a frame of reference.
What does DD stand for?
I'm so sorry.
Design
Thank you for
something,
asking
but-
that question. I should have been more clear. It stands for design development, and that is one of the several stages of design that we go through. First, we have a concept, and the concept design is think about drawings on napkins. That's concept. The schematic design has some more detail, and we talked about that really several months ago and went through that review. So that was schematic. Now we're at design development, and design development is exactly what it sounds like. It's a development of the design from schematic so that we can say, yes, we know this is what we want. We have a pretty good idea what all this is before we go to construction documents where we kind of detail all of the little things that take us to bid time. So thank you so much for asking that. I should have mentioned that earlier.
And Kate, since you mentioned it, I was going to say this at the end, but if you wouldn't mind on all the slides, if we could just have a note that SD is schematic design and
We
DD.
certainly
So
can.
that, members of the public, who might not be as close to this, they don't have to go digging. And right, yes, they don't have to, yes. And there's future slides that we would
And
need
there
that
are
as well.
there are probably some other acronyms that we want to avoid as well.
But Ms. Solomon, so just the schematic design is what we approved
I got it.
in October, right? Yes. And so we've been in the design development stage. Thanks.
And so we've been taking this deliberate path through design to figure out what it was that we wanted, start to design it, idealize it, and then really make it into what it is that is fantastic, but what we would like to afford and what will fit within PDE. What we are doing tonight is providing this high-level presentation, as we talked about at the onset. We will be back in about a week, I guess it's a week exactly, for the board meeting where we'll give this presentation to the full board and have a dialogue, which if it mirrors the schematic design discussions, we'll be taking comments, just like the one that you gave us now. and we will work to have those changes. In fact, I'll tell you, we asked some special permission to provide that presentation tomorrow morning because we want to have it in Dr. Batchelor's hands just to get some comments like that. So we're going to try and make some of those adjustments tomorrow before we start to finalize that for next week and make that a little bit better for digestion. So we're here for the May Facilities Committee meeting at the high-level presentation. The May board meeting, we'll have the presentation again. We'll have a dialogue. We'll take input. We will, between the May board meeting and the June facilities meeting, we will make changes. We will make incorporation of comments from the board and from the administration, and we will press that forward just like we did with schematic to go through that process of bettering the design and bettering what we're doing together as a board and as a community here. Finally, after the June Facilities Committee meeting, we will be back for the June board meeting, for the business meeting, and we will be talking about your opportunity to approve design development phase and what that looks like, what our final adjusted costs are, because some of the things will have cost adjustments as we move through this discussion as well. And finally, looking at the costs and the process for the Act 34 hearing that we need to do as a part of this work. Later on tonight, I will give you a little bit of detail about Act 34 because I want to make it very clear, and it seems like it very rarely is, not just here for Ethan, but at any school district. What the heck is in Act 34 and what's not in it? So we're going to delineate that for you today.
So we put this slide in as a reminder because it's very important to understand, as Damien alluded to, that as we've looked for efficiency, found efficiency in the design, went through the process of value engineering, we've kept the goals of the project in mind. And this is the slide that you may recall having seen at schematic design. And it really, while we kept our eye on the ball in terms of making sure that we were not compromising the vision for the new Ethan as we went through this process. So these are the graphic check marks, so to speak, of the things that were those high-level vision priorities from the outset. And as we looked at ways to bring the cost in line, we knew we could not sacrifice, could not compromise on these things. So this list is here as a reminder that those priorities are still being achieved as we looked at ways to find efficiency in the design.
The next slide is an update of our schedule, and the schedule really over the design development stage has not moved very much. One thing that is of note is that our land development submission will be now going in June. We've been working through that. I think there will be some important guidance coming out of these meetings related to some land development issues and how we handle stormwater, et cetera. But we're trying to make sure that we've got all that nailed down so that we can submit for permitting. And while we've been having rich dialogue with Radnor Township, we have to get that we have to make that actual and official submission, and we're seeing that happening in June. If you look down through that list, you will see that there are board actions in red, and some of the important ones, besides the one that we just talked about, related to approval of design development, that consideration is when we might approve releasing for bid, and right now we're projecting that in November. If we release for bid in November and bid generally over the holidays, we're looking for a potential award in February of 2025. What that does is it allows for a spring start, and I think if you reflect on what I just noted about a bid that we just did this past week, that's not awarded yet. So that work really will not start until late May, at best early June. That particular project has a similar schedule to Ethan, where the building itself finishes earlier than confined summertime work like you may have had at the high school because of because the building was occupied. And that garnered some good bid competition that we're hoping to see here. So I expect, I'm going to tell you that I expect those final dates to move a little bit, but, and we mentioned this before, I believe that those dates moving a little bit are not going to hurt us one little bit in the long run, and we're going to want to make sure when we get close to bid that we're not bidding at a time when other projects are bidding and we're in competition with other school districts that are building schools to try and get bidders here. So we'll be thoughtful about that too, but this is the way the schedule looks here at the end of design development.
So what is DD? What is design development? This is, again, a slide that we brought out to lead off the process that we entered back in October of last year. And so over the subsequent 7 months till today, we've been conducting those detailed design meetings with the end users, and then engaging with the engineers in the design in deeper detail, that mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, food service. And there was, I guess I should have counted how many meetings we had, because I think it would be an impressive number. But at any rate, a lot of detail went into this. And so this package, this is actually a stack of drawings that represents this work, and that is bringing us to the point where we've identified all of the major decisions with respect to the construction of the building, the envelope of the building, windows, doors, with the site layout that I'll show in a moment, the location of major features, and getting into the building controls, the automation, the technology, all of those sorts of things. And that's allowed us to then generate some visuals of the design that you'll see, and more of those will follow as they're developed in the next month. And then ultimately to provide that set of drawings to SiteLogic so that they can do the detailed cost estimating, and we can have this value engineering process that has been ongoing, and that those are the numbers, the costs then that get plugged into the Act 34 booklet and the documents moving forward there. So a very important phase of the design. A lot of decisions have been made. Where we go from here, there's more decisions to make. There's feedback on the design to be received and then implemented. But what you see and will see in front of you is the results of all of the stakeholders really having the opportunity to provide their input into the design. And on the next slide is our Act 34 summation. So again, maybe not necessary to read each of these bullet points again, but what the Act 34 process does is we get points, as we call them, based on the pupil capacity, what's called the rated pupil capacity. If you see those numbers in the documents, it's not the actual occupancy of the building, it's a different factor. But that factor is then multiplied by what's called an aggregate per pupil cost, that then the product of that is the aggregate building expenditure standard. So when you hear us talk about the Act 34 limit, it's really that product, the multiple of the standard cost times that capacity. And that is what provides the cap for the cost of the project. And so in that number, and Damien will help with another slide on this in a moment, but the factors that go into that and then get compared to that cost, I should say, is the building construction cost only, not the site, the architect's fees, furniture, fixture, and equipment costs, the things that you think of as being nailed down or brought into the building itself, and then that cost is then compared to that limit. And so when we're talking about the Act 34 cost, it's that calculation based on the estimates, and it's being compared against the limit that is set by the legal documents that formulate that. You may also recall that we talked about how that per pupil cost increases each year. And that cost increased by 4.3% in 2024, which is noted at the bottom of the slide. That was a number lower than we had originally anticipated. For comparison, last year's number was about 14%. Our estimate, our conservative estimate, was that this year would be 6. Well, it's outside our control. We can't figure out how that was arrived at, but it's 4.3. So we've been chasing that number as well as we've been going through this process. So as you'll see, we have a solution. We have the ability to abide by those regulations, by that limit, and we'll show you what that comparative number is. But that's the Act 34 in a nutshell. If there's questions on that, we can certainly answer at the end. And I'll turn it over to Damien to talk about the specifics then of this project.
When we've talked about Act 34 in the past, there's been a lot of questions, and I've kind of vowed that we were going to, at Radnor, have probably the clearest understanding of Act 34 that I've ever seen, because I've been involved in a lot of them, and they're not clear enough really on any occasion. And so I want to start by talking about how we get to the Act 34 elementary capacity, or that number. As you can see, that number is 2,218. Well, we're not putting 2,218 children in that school. What that capacity is derived from is each space of the school is looked at, it's looked at for what its function is and what its size is, and PDE says, based on that, you can put so many pupils or ascribe so many pupils to that particular room. And you add that up across the school. So, for example, we could say that this room, which is large enough to be a classroom, might be a small instructional room. And if we did that, it would get fewer students ascribed to it than a classroom would get. So as the architect goes through and understands the program for what the district wants, it looks at each space and says, how can I use that space for learning, and what is the most efficient way to use it for learning? When we figure out what all those are, and each one of those spaces in a table has a number of students next to it, a title and a size, and that all fits within the requirements of PDE's limits for each type of room, it's added up, and we get 2,218. We take that number and we multiply it by the most recent per pupil cost limit number that we have from the state, which just went up by 4.2%, and that gives us a building expenditure limit of $55,707,288. So that's how we get to a limit. The next question is, what compares to that limit, and where do those numbers come from? So the first number is the building construction cost. And what I wanted to be able to do for the board is to be able to show you that if you see the 49,257 number, which is the building construction cost, and you go back to an estimate, you'll see that we estimated our cost for the building to be something before we took scope changes that we could make to make the building more efficient. We deducted that amount, and the amount came out to $49,257,000. So it is the original estimate of the cost of the building minus the costs of the things that we have worked on to make the building more efficient, equaling the cost of $49,257,000.
For a point of clarification right now, are you talking about the stuff you've done in the last month?
Yes.
Okay, so this is am I using the right word, value engineering?
Well,
it's different.
That's the right word. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, because value engineering means different things to different people. But yes, for our purposes, that is the value engineering. It is those efficiencies that we found to reduce the cost, and we've taken the original estimate less those efficiencies equals that 49,257.
So I don't refer back how much that's been reduced.
Certainly.
And could we put a note maybe on the slide so that we can follow along and don't have
Yes,
to
in
refer
fact,
back?
we had that noted, and it did
Okay.
not make the cut.
Okay.
So we will do that. With that calculation will show up. I'm hoping it will be on the update for Dr. Batchelor tomorrow morning. I want to see if I can find the slide that had the number on it.
I think it's gonna be-
So if you go to the third slide,
Yes.
you will see under the design development estimate in the green column, the third number down is 56,995,000. And then you'll see a minus 7,738,000. It is those two numbers added together, or the one subtract from the other, which was the scope options and value engineering, that take us down to that 49,257. And you'll see that very clearly on the next update.
Great, that would be helpful.
The next item is the architect's costs on that building design. That $2,839,000 number is a subset of the cost of the architect on that third slide. If you go down about midway through the page, you'll see architect's fees are $2,989,000. And so this is the part of that fee that goes toward the building. Some of their fee goes toward site and other things, but this is what goes toward the building. And that's where that comes from. The furnishings, fixtures, and equipment is a little easier. It's a one-to-one, and you can see that that was called out a little bit lower on that summary sheet from slide 3, the $1.1 million. When you add all those up, we get to $53,196,000. You'll recall that we had a target of being under the Act 34 limit, and we wanted to be $2 to $3 million under that because we wanted ourselves to have a cushion. With the efficiencies that we found to date and the way that we've looked at it and our recommendations, we are just over $2.5 million under the limit. Now, one of the points of confusion that often occurs is we have these numbers, but they don't tie out to the total project cost. Well, that's what the last two numbers on this page are for. Site work costs, which are not part of the Act 34 calculation, are shown there at $12,410,000. When you take those site work costs and you add in the remaining soft costs, which is all the soft costs, but not the FF&E or furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and not the architect's fee that's above, the amount of money that's left there is $8,269,000, almost $270,000. When you add the 53 million to the 12 and the 8, now you've got your total project cost. So it was our goal to be able to show you where those Act 34 numbers come from, or what they're a subset of, and then show you the rest of the costs that build out to get a total project that ties back to your estimate. I hope that that's more clear than it was before, and I'd be happy to take questions before we move on. I really wanted to make sure that we understood that.
So just to clarify, the savings is really in the building construction costs, right? Everything else seems to be consistent from the previous.
You'll notice there's some savings in the site work too. So the rest of it, I think your observation is correct. Everything is pretty close. There's savings in the site work that we took out. The site work went up significantly. If we want to go back to that slide 3, just to round this out, you'll see the top dollar figure, that site work went up significantly. It went up, it doubled.
Right, but there's no savings.
There's $1 million of savings underneath. The next line down shows that we found $1 million of reduction in the site work.
Where, I don't see that line.
It says less site development, scope, options, and value engineering. Do you see that?
Got 12,410 on here. which
Yeah,
is-
it's the line under that.
Yeah, but so that's not doing this,
No, we just, our next line is remaining soft cost
yeah.
on
so
the
that-
presentation I have.
Right, so that reduction isn't,
If you go back to slide 3, Ms. Duffy, you'll see,
Yeah, but what she's saying is we're showing
You're
site,
showing the old
we're
one.
showing site work costs in there, and it's not taken out down here, so.
showing the
I,
reduction.
I understand what you're telling me, and you're correct.
Yeah.
I have to look at that because it's not tying out the way it should.
Okay.
You see this? We're
I
showing-
I am following you. Yeah, keep in mind that that doesn't affect the Act 34 costs, but you're right, it's an inconsistency that should be corrected
I have
between
to-
these two
I have to
slides.
figure out, I have to make sure that that's
But,
right.
but then is the 73,876 correct?
No, and that's good, because.
That would be good if it's an error in our favor, but I need to check that.
Yeah.
Okay? What's happening is,
Again, it would be very helpful if we had all the notes on this chart, because I
And
think
you
to
will.
refer back
and
is,
we're gonna make that check, and I bet my friend Adrian Vino behind me is furiously working at his computer right now to see that. So maybe we'll even know that later.
Retotal that on your spreadsheet.
Yeah, we're gonna retotal it in both places. So what the goal is that you're able to see where that ties out, and that makes us find things exactly what,
Got me
exactly
curious.
what we're just talking about here. So what's happened is, the site work was, we had a plug number in since schematic design way back when. That was $6 million. When the site got designed and we realized how much, what fill we were bringing in and what the grades looked like, et cetera, that site work went up significantly. The problem that we have with site is a lot of things that are required in the site are required there to either make sure the building stands up, that you have your program, or are required for DEP, et cetera. So we don't have a lot of opportunity to reduce costs in the site. We have more opportunity to reduce costs in the building. Not only is it, is it a larger number, but there's just more options there to look at. So there is a reduction in site work. We found some efficiencies in soft costs as well. And we also certainly found lots of opportunity in the building for efficiencies, and we'll go through those here. Thank you for pointing that out because, and I apologize that that was not spot on correct, but that will be corrected for next meeting. And I hope that it is the error that you and I are hoping for. So, I'm sorry, Mr. Thornton, did we answer your questions? I'm not sure that we got all the way through those.
Yes, you did, but it made me think of another question.
Sure.
Is there an estimate for how much that error could be? Because if we're having a savings, a $2 or $3 million savings is fantastic, but it also sounds like it could go the other way as well.
No, I don't, it shouldn't go the other way. With that, the discrepancy that was pointed out was, it doesn't appear that we took that cost off of the bottom line. So it's not off of this bottom line, so it either means that that number is not tying out for some reason, or there's a problem on the other spreadsheet. But we'll look at that, and probably before we even leave here tonight, we'll make sure that we know how that.
and if I'm reading that correctly, the best-case scenario would be that it'd be reduced by
Yes.
997.
The
Yeah,
best
so
case is-
approximately a million, just a
If
million.
we were lucky, if the bank made an error in our favor in this case, we would have a.
Be at a
$1 million.
7.2 number, 72 million something, okay.
Yes.
Correct, right?
There should not be a way where it gets higher. That's correct. That is correct. So thank you for indulging me in my Act 34 conversation. We we are going to, if you look at the next page, this is schematic design estimate versus design development. And what you see here is the new construction number and the site work number as they were designed, and then the scope reduction and alternates taken out at the bottom in the orange. So we're gonna check this table as well, because I want to make sure that I'm confident that table is adding up correctly. Because as you see, they're all tying out to 73,876. Importantly here, you can see that the new construction costs went up as we expected they would. Now, I honestly expected the new construction would go up a little bit less than this, but I knew it was going to go up. That's what happens through the process. We fortunately had lots of good ideas and opportunities to find building efficiencies and found those. The cost of phasing required around the existing school, that dropped a bit. We talked about site work and it's increased there. And I see a delta that's not quite right. There's, and then we show that reduction. So we will go through these tables to just make sure that we've got them all in good order. And I think that the place where we're struggling the most is that we anticipated that the site was going to cost something way back in schematic and even held over from concept design. And really what the site is costing us is more than that. We're able to modulate the building a lot more effectively than we're able to modulate the site and save costs, but we're doing all of that to drive costs down. This is, so I'll do this before I turn it back over to Steve. We talk about the words value engineering. Value engineering, in its probably most pristine sense, is when you make a change to a building and nobody can notice it, but you save money. So a good example of that is if you have a certain type of foundation and it was going to cost you $1,000 and you changed your foundation and it cost you $800, you saved money, but nobody sitting in the room knows any differently. That's really good value engineering. A lot of the things that we look at are what we call scope options. Scope options are when you have a certain amount of glass and you reduce that glass a little bit, or you're actually changing a quantity, or you're changing something in the design so that it's not just no difference whatsoever because you changed the material or you changed a design, but there's some difference that you can perceive. So I'm very careful that when we talk about how we make our buildings more efficiently, they're usually done through scope options. Sometimes, and not here, but sometimes owners get themselves in a position where they have to make a cut to the program. And we literally call those cuts. You will hear, I'll hear people say, well, we value engineered the auditorium off of the building. I've actually heard somebody tell that story. Well, we're not in any position like that where we're cutting something out. What we're doing is having to find these efficiencies. So when we talk, if we say value engineering or scope options, they're all kind of being used interchangeably here, but it's really finding those cost efficiencies so that we can get the most for our money.
Thank you, Damien. So in the slides that follow, we're talking about those reductions that have been made or those efficiencies that have been found. They're generally gathered into four categories: interior, exterior, that's with respect to the building, and then MEP, which again, another acronym, means mechanical, electrical, plumbing, so that's the HVAC, mechanical systems of the building, and then site. So we'll look at each of those here individually. And so each of these has a little chart associated with it that breaks that out. And this is an important piece to understand in terms of the process that's reflected here. So you see the color coding there. When we looked at those reduction options, we went through a process over the past month where, with administration, with stakeholders, we came up with a master list, gathered all the ideas, and then went through it line by line and said, is this something that we want to do, to recommend, right? So that's what, so the result here is a recommendation. And we came up with things that were easy yeses, so to speak, and then we came up with things that were alternates. Alternates are things that are built into the bidding process where the contractor will price things a couple different ways and then generate a price that then you as the board have the opportunity to give the thumbs up or the thumbs down to. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is we don't know what's going to happen with the bids, so we don't want to overcut, right? And then end up, if the bidding comes in favorably, then we've lost the opportunity to include something in the design that we wanted. And so but then conversely, it gives us a little bit of a safety relief valve if the bids come in high, that again, we have opportunities to recover our budget without having to rebid or take other measures. So that would be the alternate. So the alternate would be things that would be documented into the design and then would be a choice once bids are received. We also had a maybe category for a while that we struggled with some things, and we've ultimately emptied that category because we wanted to have this be a succinct recommendation. And then there were things that we said no to. So those were things that were more critical, maybe was going to influence the building in a way we didn't want in the design. And so while we identified them as an option, they are not included as part of the recommendation. They're not deducted from the costs that you're seeing here. So when we talk about the costs that Damien's been presenting, those costs include the yeses and the alternates. So the yeses are the things that are included in the recommendation as a cost impact, and then the things that are going to be included in the bidding as an alternate that ultimately could be rejected or could be accepted. So that this will come up a couple of different times, so I want to make sure that's clear before moving on. And so now the first of those four categories, the interior. And these slides are provided for your reference. We don't need to go through all of these line items. We can certainly respond to any questions in particular, but what we've done is provided some visuals to help identify and understand the impact of some of the bigger ticket items that are on these lists. So.
And I just want to add that these slides that you're seeing here with the recommendations, the Act 34, the value engineering stuff, are all in the administrative section for your review too. There's a separate attachment there to go through it in finer detail.
Thank you. Okay. So with respect to the interior of the building, the best way to really describe that was to show this plan. That is a diagram that identifies the location and sort of a general understanding of each of those things. So the areas that are in red or terracotta, however it happens to appear for you, are areas where we did reduce the size of the building. The best way to reduce cost is to make the building smaller. So we looked for opportunities where, without impacting the program, after all the dust had settled on the design development, where were areas that we could reduce the size of the building without impacting the program. And so those are some of the things that you see there. A reduction to the size of the multi-purpose room, a slight reduction to the size of the two-story library and art wing. On the ends of each classroom wing, we actually took the stair tower, which was a projection off the end of the building, and tucked it inside. So That reduces the square footage of the building. And then we actually, through those efforts, because again, we're keeping our eye on Act 34 the whole time, trying to find every point we can to help with our buffer, we did identify through some of these cost reductions actually a way to increase the limit. And that is done by those two blue areas. We were able to identify an additional small group instruction space potentially. And then in conjunction with a revised toilet room layout, we were able to reduce the footprint of the toilet rooms and thereby increase the size of an adjacent education space. And so we actually, through this process, have an increase in the Act 34 limit. And then the dashed lines indicate areas where we reduce the width of corridors. Again, areas that we did look at it carefully to make sure we weren't creating pinch points within the building from a circulation standpoint. We compared it to the other elementary schools and found that we could slightly reduce some of these corridor widths, which again takes a substantial amount of square footage out of the building along their entire length, and have substantial savings there. So that's just a graphic representation of some of those numbers that are on the preceding page. The next section is with respect to the exterior of the building. Again, you'll see the color coding of yeses and nos and alternates, and all of those line items are available to review in detail. And then on the next two slides that follow there are with respect to the exterior, updated renderings that show you the impact of that. So the first slide is viewed from the front, the uphill side of the building. This is reflective of where we made that shortening of the size of the multipurpose room, the canopy that went with that in terms of a reduction. We made a change to the roof line. We removed while we kept the shed roof profile where it's very prominent and creates an occupiable section of the space, so to speak, that you perceive it from the interior of the building. We kept it there, but we removed those shed roof elements from the 3 classroom wings. And we replaced them with HVAC screens around rooftop equipment. So the effect of that is that mechanical equipment that was previously inside the shed roof volume of the building is now exterior. So not an uncommon solution at all in our marketplace, and so we felt that for the savings that generated, that is a recommendation of ours. And then, but in all of this, we kept an eye on the form and the beauty of the building as well. So we looked at adding a little bit of weight, an architectural term in this sense, the mass of the building on the end where the wellness classroom is. And so we looked for opportunities when we changed that roof line to achieve some of what we were trying to do with the building in other ways. So that is and what I'll say is these are 2 sample renderings that have been developed for prime time, so to speak. We are going to continue to develop other more detailed renderings to show it. Some of the ones that you're used to seeing from previous presentations, they will be developed over the next month. So the next slide is that view that we're used to seeing from the downhill side of the building, looking at the 2-story classroom wings, the courtyards in between. This is a little better angle to see the impact of the removal of the shed roof as well as the parapets around the buildings. Again, from this low angle, you barely see those screens surrounding the rooftop equipment. You'll see the reduction in the stair volumes that come out. Yes.
Yeah, because
Yes.
Isn't that still a
it-
bump out?
Well, I'm happy to hear that comment. It's still a bump out, but it's much smaller. It's about a third of the size of the previous one. So yes, again, in a lot of cases, I think these are things that do not impact the overall massing of the building, the architectural impact. In fact, in some of the cases, we actually like it better. So, and I'll let you decide for yourself. Won't show my cards in that regard, but at any rate, you'll also see the shortening of the library and art, the two-story library and art wing. Again, I think if I didn't point that out to you, you probably wouldn't really notice that. To the left of that volume, where you see the ramp switchback coming down, you'll.
That's a ramp.
Yeah, that's a ramp.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Like our high school
yes.
ramps, yeah.
Right, he's grounded on the ramp, right. So what is different there is you don't see stairs. So we were able to eliminate the stairs that come down there, but keep the ramp. You'll recall the theme from the high school, which was take the ramp. So it's a universal access philosophy that you don't need the stair if everybody's taking the ramp. And again, that will be massaged a little bit as the design moves forward. I can't say I'm completely satisfied at the moment about how that looks. But this is also a good view where you're starting to see the impact of the grading on the site. So we see that the playground in the foreground is a little bit lower. So you have ramped sidewalks back up to the courtyards between the classroom wings, and and then finally you'll see if as you look at the list, you'll see things like reduction in curtain wall. And so an example of that is if you look above that ramp, you'll see, if you compare that to previous rendered views, you'll see less curtain wall exterior glass window. That happens to be into the music classroom. That gave us the opportunity for more storage space on the inside, and it's still a massive amount of glass to bring natural light and views into that space. So that's really a summation of the view that you're seeing here. And as I mentioned, we will come back with additional views of the exterior, some additional views of the interior as well as they get fully developed and ready for publicity. The third section is MEP, so that again is the mechanical systems, the HVAC systems, plumbing and electrical of the building. These are not things that are easy to show you a rendering of, so you won't see visuals for these, but still very critical items to the design of the building. And I would say there was a massive amount of conversation about that involving the engineers and the facilities department and really looking at how we could achieve the goals of the project there with respect to sustainability and environmental consciousness that is a priority of the board, as well as improve indoor air quality for the building and low maintenance. That return on investment of if we're spending a dollar more than we have to, it better be returning us more than that over the lifetime of the building. So then the final section is with respect to the site, and that is the following slide there. So this is, I guess this slide is here, sorry, as a summation of the building-related items. So this lists the recommended, or the yeses, so to speak, the alternates, the maybes, which we emptied that category, and the no's. So the total of all of those categories is almost $8.5 million. But when you take off the no's and you look at what is the basis of our recommendation leading into the board approval, that is over $7.7 million with respect to the building itself.
So the seven sorry. So the 7738 includes the alternates. So that would
Correct.
mean that we would get to do those.
That,
Worst
right.
case scenario,
Worst
you
case
wouldn't do
scenario.
the alternates.
You would not.
You would not,
You would
right.
need them to, hit your budget. So for example, in the bid event that I talked about.
Oh, right, record,
From
okay.
last week.
I got it.
The bids
Yes.
came in a way
Sorry.
that they didn't take the deduct alternates, they
Yes.
actually took some add
Thank you.
ones.
I just had to
Yep.
click my brain.
You-
Yes.
you
okay.
got it.
Got it.
However, if we overshot and the bids come in favorably, then we have the opportunity to bring some of those alternates back in. So that's a carefully devised bidding strategy so that we're not losing value on bid day to the district. Okay, and then the final section is the site. And these are dollars that do not affect Act 34, as we went through before, but it still does affect the overall project budget. And so there were some items on this list as well that you can review. And then the next slide is this revised site plan that I'll point out some of those larger ticket items, so to speak. So this is the view of the site at completion. So as we move into construction document phase, there will be a lot of conversation about phasing. So, for instance, the lodge is not depicted here because ultimately, at the end of the project, it will be removed, but during construction, it will be there. So you'll see phased drawings coming once DD is approved and we move into construction documents, but this is the view when the project is complete. So you'll see that we are retaining the existing multi-purpose physical education field that exists along Sproul Road. There was a desire, if it was possible within the project budget, to upgrade that field. And we have again discussed that, the pros and cons of that, and removed that from the scope of the project. There's been some savings achieved with respect to the importing of fill by introducing some additional retaining walls on essentially the west side of the building. And so this is just a further developed site plan that starts to show the playground in that sort of kidney bean shape. We've identified with the site engineer where the detention basins will be, that stormwater management piece of the project that's very important. We're retaining the tennis courts, and which is something you've seen. We've included that emergency access drive and the ability to access the mechanical room in those rare instances of equipment replacement and that sort of thing. So this will then, once it's approved, this will move forward with beginning the land development submission process. And anything more that you feel might be important to point out here with respect to the site? Okay, we can certainly answer questions on that.
I have a question, I guess it's number 52.
Sure.
So changing from the temporary HVAC coolers towers to a salvage ones from Downingtown. Is there any concern that we may be down the road in replacing those, using a salvage?
Those are only for the momentary time between when we take the well field down during construction and the completion of the new building. They're not going to be used long-term.
Got it,
So
okay.
they're a relatively short-term piece of equipment that if they're in good enough shape, and cooling towers, outside the controls and stuff are relatively simple. And if it's in good enough shape and we can maintain it, it'll be a value for us to consider it if it's available.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks for that, because it's not easily explained in a few words.
Okay. So then just to wrap up on slide 23, again, we'll bookend the presentation by showing where we're headed next. We're here at the May Facilities Committee meeting with this high-level presentation. We look for opportunities next week, and then at the June Facilities Committee to come back with additional updates, additional views, the opportunity to respond to comments that have been received. So this deliberate process allows us to make this presentation multiple times and receive and respond to comments leading up to the recommended action at the June board meeting.
So I think what would be helpful now is for feedback from the committee on what would you like to see? And I think the other board members, will view this, especially now, this meeting, though it's not being streamed or have it recording, so other board members can view this between now and next Tuesday. What would you like to see? This presentation will get revised and updated, so there's going to be some more materials, more drawings, a little more detail added to it between now and next Tuesday. Our thoughts were to go through some of the specifics on what are some of these changes that are, because there's a long list of changes. So yes, so to highlight some of the specifics is what could be the starting point for the board meeting. I don't know that we need to go back through all the details of the first few slides, or maybe just quickly summarize, but then to go through the details of the changes, the drawings, the impact. And it's an opportunity at the board meeting for the full board to ask questions on any of this, from the things from the beginning, don't have to be tonight, on Act 34, the milestones, any of the pieces to come. And then we're looking again for, another opportunity for the board to talk and discuss and ask questions at both the June facilities and June board meeting. So any feedback now on what you'd like to see, what would be helpful, and even if you're not sure at this point, because this is a lot of information, between now and Friday, let Mr. Morris or me know what would be helpful to information that we could, have prepared for Friday. Is that helpful, Mr. Morris?
Absolutely. So I think it's important too, in May, the team talked about the reductions in the roof line, the sawtooth, right, and the staircases and stuff like that. While we touched on those as cost reduction items, they are recommended to get us down to that Act 34 buffer, or where we're at currently. I think it's important then we take every one of those items and just realize what cost it had, impact, and that's what's in the list. So as you go through, everything that they mentioned this evening is on that list, line by line, with the actual figure of how it reduces the cost. So, again, the recommendations. But as we start to consider, well, we don't necessarily want that, we just have to look at the dollar value and then add that back in, right? Because everything that we say no to, that's a recommendation, we have to put that dollar value back into the project, right? So it's going to impact it. So something to think about, that's all.
So I guess the question is, is it helpful for us to share some overarching questions right now? Or do we, because of time, we feel like we want to, write them in an email to you? But, I would think that having some of those overarching questions in preparation for next week could be helpful. We could deliver those via email, or-
I think we could do both. I mean, let's be
Okay.
mindful of the time. So if
Okay.
there's a couple burning ones right now, we could also do it over email. And then, and that could help impact, influence how we present, how our, the group presents on Tuesday next week.
Okay, so I will open it up, but before, I'd like to just do an overarching comment. Well, thank you. I mean, I understand this is a ton of work, and I appreciate the detail. I think any step you could do that we discussed to make it clearer to follow, because there's a lot of different numbers, and clarifying that on each page would be, I think, helpful to all.
Yes.
So that certainly, I hope, gets done by next week. An overarching comment, just because, this is a big decision on our board, and I'm just thinking about stepping back, and I know there's at least one other board member that has the same question, comment, thought, and the one kind of the one piece that we can't really move the needle on to a large extent, is the site development cost, and, right, what's involved there. And that was really the big surprise here. I'm thinking back to I think it was maybe last spring, when Mr. Behrens, thank you, sorry, Mr. Behrens, you said something that really made an impact on me. And one of the questions, we were debating about where this building should go, and we had a lot of discussion, and you said, if I could pick any place to place this building on this site, this is where I would place the building. And that was, that was very influential for me to hear that this is, we're building a building for, 100 years, so 75 years. So that felt good. But in light of what you know now, would that still be your answer? And I guess and then part of that is, I'd also ask, even if we said, we're going to think this, and we're going to take down the building, and we're going to place the building, we're going to move the students. I'm not advocating that we do this at all, but let's say we just could, go back in time, and we'd say, we're going to move the students, and we're going to build this building. Well, this building is obviously much bigger in scope than the building we currently have. So are we still going to have significant site development costs, even if we built it on top of the current building, just by the nature of the land we're dealing with and the slope, and that we would be going into that slope, and I'm assuming that's where a lot of the costs are coming from. So I guess there's two questions there. One, would you still say this is the ideal place for this building? And then two, would you, and I know you can't really say, but would you imagine that we'd still incur significant site costs just by the nature of our property to build the kind of building we'd want to build?
And I'm fine with us answering these tonight, but also.
And you don't
but
have, right.
I was going to say,
right.
tonight could be an opportunity to just gather the questions and
Yes.
then have these answers as part of the presentation for the full board next Tuesday, too.
Yeah. Thank you.
That might-
Say you don't need to answer
No,
that.
I'm just because
I just wanted to
because I think that's a
prepare
great
that-
question,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
And there might be others that we want to capture, so
Right.
much
So-
time, I think it's very important to capture these questions, so thank you.
So I think it probably would be best. Sorry. You can say that, but probably best to wait so that you can think about that, or no?
No, that's fine. I can give you a short answer, and because you did raise a good point, and it's a good question, and you're hitting on the key point with the second, which is that this is a very differently shaped, much larger building than the existing. So there simply isn't space on the existing footprint, the plateau, if you will, that's occurring there to fit this building. And I think if you think back to those various options that we laid out on the site, we demonstrated that this site cost would be incurred, or a large portion of it. I mean, even more recently, we looked at some different arrangements and sort of and did some tests ourselves to satisfy ourselves some of these questions that you're raising, and found that there was not a large opportunity to impact, because no matter where you look on this site, there's a slope. So it really comes down to, again, with that long time horizon over the next 50 years, where does this building want to be on the site? Yes, the cost is a painful reality. Nobody's denying that. But where this building is positioned, how it interacts with the site, how you approach it along the road, the relationship between the parking and the site, the position of the playgrounds and where they fall, and the views out to the natural landscape. No, that reality has not changed, that this really is the best way to put a building of this size on this site and take advantage of the slope with respect to the two-story classroom wings. Every classroom gets natural light, and with the key configuration of the building. So, no, I can confidently say that my view of that has not changed. yes, the dollars are a painful reality. But if you start to offset that about of other things transporting children somewhere else, and there's no free lunch in that regard. There's costs no matter how you look at it, and and as we looked at simple changes to try to reposition the building, tuck it here, slide it there, it was not moving the needle substantially on the cost, unfortunately. So that's the off-the-cuff answer. We can certainly give, if that question comes up again, we can be prepared with some more details, perhaps.
Thank you. And with that, I will open it up. Ms. Lamp?
Yeah, I just have a couple of things. It was, thanks for putting all of this together. I think what would be easier is if, because I was constantly going back and forth, if there could be just a summary of all the costs for, because I think that there are 3 sections, right? Four sections?
Yeah, inside, outside, mechanical.
Right, and then that
electrical,
fourth
plumbing,
one wasn't really included in that total, right? If we can include that fourth one in that total, so that we're not doing the addition ourselves while we're looking through the presentation, I
Yes.
think that would be helpful. The second thing is, I would just reiterate something that Lydia said in a prior meeting, in that we are trying to stay within the Act 34, but we're also trying to, if we can implement value engineering in other areas outside of that Act 34 to just keep the cost down, I think we should just keep researching.
There we are.
Okay,
We absolutely are.
thank you.
I think what would be helpful for me as a new board member, the photos that we have here are great, but I don't have the history. So I'm not sure what you're showing me has changed. If it's significant to show a before versus what we have now, I think that would be helpful.
I do have a few, and some of this is coming from other board members, so, who had reviewed the presentation. I guess one thing is when we're talking about different materials, like a different, I don't know if I'm gonna say it right, windowsill, a different floor, could we also, I would like you to speak a little bit to, yes, we might be picking something cheaper right now, but what's the maintenance and the longevity and the replacement cost?
Yeah, great question, and that's in the DNA of all of these conversations. Unfortunately, Act 34 looks at only construction cost, which is that bid day first cost. So, as we all know, you can always find something cheaper to buy, but it doesn't last as long. And so we're working that balance all the time, and that's actually reflected in the alternates to a large degree. So take something like flooring. The VCT floor that is typical for classrooms, it's very inexpensive to install, but over a 50-year time horizon, it's the most expensive flooring. The flooring that costs many times more on bid day, actually for that following 50 years, is the cheapest life cycle cost, right? So that's materials, that's HVAC systems that we looked at. When you design a school, when done properly, you're looking at those life cycle costs. And so, yes, we keep that in mind. And unfortunately, that's where something like Act 34 doesn't really respond to that in an ideal world. And so where we think there's a potential return on investment to be gained, that might be something that we include as an alternate. And so, yes, we're mindful of that. I'm not sure if I completely answered your question or not, but.
Okay. And then I just have, maybe I'll just reel them up, I think these are where I'm seeing larger savings that have been identified and are being recommended. It says reducing the amount of interior glass to 40%. 40% from what? And I'm concerned there, because I always get nervous when you say glass, because I think this whole design is predicated on light, and I would imagine glass is how we bring light into the classrooms.
So
Right.
could you, next week, bring specific examples, maybe that
That is
before and
our
after? I think
plan.
that goes to
Yes.
Mr. Thornton's point.
Yes.
Before and afters, this is the glass where it's
For
being
the
used.
interior views, that's the kind of thing that we want to show you visuals to
Excellent.
demonstrate.
Yes.
So, but in answer to the 40%, it's a 40% reduction over what was shown in the original set that was
So-
priced.
So and
So if
you're-
we had
and
10
having the
square feet, it
pictures-
became 6.
Okay, and having your pictures, I mean, I know at one point we talked about, there was full glass, and then we talked about having, is that what we're talking about? Like having half
Glass was where we
walls?
started, and
Right.
you'll see that. So,
Okay.
when we sat in this room and had this discussion, I said, have a look at the wall over here.
Yeah.
In the original design, it's full glass.
Right.
If we have a little bit of non-glass wall at the top and some at the bottom, because we're gonna have furniture there, in your line of sight, your normal line of sight, you're still getting the majority of that. But
Okay,
you're
yep.
creating other opportunities in that design efficiency change. So the 40, I want to make sure we say something important. 40% wasn't like, well, 40%. We didn't pull that out of a hat. We thought about that a little bit, and then we said, okay, where does that happen? So it sounds like a big number, because it is when you talk about 40% of 100%. But when you see how you can treat that wall and do something differently with it, and it still retains the value of allowing all that light in and affording you to be able to look out, it's pretty surprising what 60% actually does.
Great, and I think those pictures will help
They will.
illustrate that. Then I think another item seems pretty significant is reducing the size of the hallways. And so, the impact of functionality, or do we have any concern there for like flow of building, and also maybe the light that's coming in when we have more narrow? I'm assuming the multipurpose room is the gym, correct? And I know, I'll speak for myself. Whenever you hear a reduction of a gym in an elementary school, in a place where we gather kids all the time, and the community also uses it outside of the school, it's concerning. And, wait, you're saying no? Oh, no. We're not to reduce the cafeteria, but to reduce, okay, I'm sorry, so.
Yes, correct.
Could you help us visualize what 675 looks like, and what kind of, so that we can visualize what kind of impact from the before and after? That's a big ticket item. And then in terms of the restroom, have we spoken with the school, the administration of the school, like to eliminate a bathroom by it seems $25,000 in the scheme of things isn't that much for, where are the kids now going? Is that a concern that they'd have to not have a bathroom proximate to the gym?
So that you're speaking of the reduction of the bathroom.
Yes.
At the gym.
At the
right?
gym.
So that kind of came with the reduction of the square footage of the multipurpose room. Storage was a big concern with the gym. So originally, prior to the reduction, we did have the restroom and the storage. So shrinking that down, one of those kind of the thought process was one of those had to kind of be eliminated. So keeping the storage and eliminating the restroom, knowing that we have right outside the gym.
Right outside,
gang-
okay.
Yeah, right
Okay.
outside the gym, we have gang bathrooms. We
Okay.
thought leaving the storage was more appropriate and useful. So that's all.
And
I was just going to say, again, just looking at the time,
Yes.
because we could go easily another hour.
I was just giving the
We'll
ones I've
keep
already
writing a
gotten.
list of these
Right.
things, and then we know that these are some of the things to start with then next week. So keep
Okay.
going. This is helpful.
And then I'll stop.
don't
I'll
stop.
just
The
do
question-
two other, because this is two other, we're reducing the overhang on the outside of the entranceway. And so did we consider, you're reducing it, what, by 50%, right? Isn't that the number? Or was it 75%?
I think it was 50.
50,
Something
okay.
like that,
Do
yeah.
we consider 25? Because one thing that I did think when looking at the new pictures, I believe the building now doesn't have really any outdoor gathering space that would be undercover. And just thinking that in Radnor Elementary, we just approved a project where, we heard how wonderful it is for, teachers to be able to go out and do some outdoor classrooms under, covered space. So just a question, we're building a new building, and is there some portico, I'm not trying to add, but, but is there some portico that should be on the building structure so that kids could go outside, or a classroom could go outside when wasn't ideal weather? So that was a question. And then I'm not really sure how we feel about this living roof that we've had at the middle school, but the first thought I had when I looked at those flat roofs, and we're trying to do environmentally friendly, is there any opportunity for a portion of that to be a living roof? And question, what's our feelings on what we did at the middle school? Is it a maintenance nightmare? Or is it something that we'd like to, at least explore? At least I think it would be nice to hear your thoughts on it and why we wouldn't pursue it. And I'm sure we'll have more questions for you, and we can gather them and send them to you, because I just feel like the more you have, and I know I already have a few more questions, but again, in light of time, we'll just send them to you so that you can be prepared. But
Yeah, we appreciate that,
Yeah,
thanks.
and I wasn't meaning to cut off questions. I was more trying to cut off the answers from
Yes.
tonight, so we gather as many questions as possible.
But I think, okay,
Those
go ahead.
long-winded architect answers, yeah.
I just want to add one other thing I think will be helpful. We do have in here that we reduce things by a certain square foot, or we have the amount. But what I don't have personally, and it may have been shared with the board previously, is what those amounts were. So I don't have the relation. So we reduced it by 600.
Yes.
But
Where did
is-
you start?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I know a lot of work.
Thank you all, yeah.
So we can move on to new business?
And before we just move on to
sorry.
this, just so, I just want to make sure we're good with agreement that take into account the questions and some of the areas where we can make improvements on the presentation, but to really begin next Tuesday with maybe just a very quick summary of some of the details that were in the beginning, where we've maybe improved the charts, shown some of the things in total, but really jump right into these questions and jump into some of these items. I'm just trying to look for efficiency of time. Does that make sense with the committee as well? Okay, good.
I think so. We can direct all board members to make sure they view this, so. Okay, yes. Okay, a new business. New business? And then lastly, any?
Oh, I do, I'm sorry, it's so late. I just wanted at some point to get an update on all the trees that were planted in conjunction with our project at the high school and with the trail, because a lot of them didn't look like they made it through the winter. So just if we could get a update, a follow-up on, we're supposed to have replanting of some of those, like where all that stands. Thank you.
Okay, and then any public, do you?
No, just that's a timely question. I was out walking with our arborists today, so we'll have an update.
Okay. And last on our agenda, public comment. Seeing none, meeting is adjourned.